Hello and welcome again. Welcome again to Autistic Radio, our live broadcast on a Sunday. Shortly we'll be going to the regular programme, the 555, where we look at Harry's Facebook page. Now I'm going to talk about what we do here at Autistic Radio, an open meeting. Decisions get made in the open often enough here at Autistic Radio. This one's about finance. We received an offer from our local charity here in Scotland, Scottish Autism. They contacted us, having been recommended, to find small charities, autistic charities, to encourage. And they asked me over Christmas to put forward a proposal, apply for something that they said they wanted to give us. So I did that over a Christmas period, and I did that in time for a very early January deadline. They then came back 6 months later and said, yes, we would like to award you with a small amount of money, and what you've decided to spend it on is a great idea. Well, that was a few weeks ago now, and they don't answer the emails, and they don't answer the text messages. What's the group's thought on how we approach this now? Should I be phoning the mobile phone number of the person who arranged this?
Well, I feel there's some explanation required, because there's nothing worse than you've been offered something and you've taken the opportunity to take that offer on, but then when you're trying to go through the process, you feel you're being ignored. Well, you have been ignored. There's been no response to inquiries or sending the information that was asked for. So I don't think it does any harm by asking the question of if there's an issue or why there hasn't been a response. Because there may be a logical one, but it does frustrate me that things like this happen far too often. That's my position. So it's a direct offer of a grant and they're not responding. Well, I think you deserve an explanation. We all do, if they haven't been responding for whatever reason. Even then, there could be reasons behind it, but it is very frustrating.
Is it just one person that you're communicating with?
Yeah, exactly that situation. One person had a remit to give out some money that they had received as a big amount from another charity, from a foundation that supports and had an amount they wanted to spend on autistic people.
Perhaps that person has moved on or been replaced, would be my thought.
If it's one person, it could be someone that's suddenly ill or unavailable for whatever unforeseen circumstances has been said, but still, it's still a frustrating experience. It's still a frustrating update. So I think it's only fair just to ask politely what's going on.
Well, here's the transgression, you see, because it's using somebody's mobile phone number that they have provided in an official capacity, but it's outside the email exchange that's happened up until now. And if that person has moved on, then the official email address that I was using should have been picked up by some other member of staff in a professional organisation. We will make a phone call, follow the story, and then report back to the group. We'll also take more information from our group meeting on Monday. So, unless anybody else has any other business, let's move on to the main meat of today, Harry.
Thanks, Jules. Hello, everyone. This is Harry's Facebook for Sunday, the 21st September 2025. And this is where we discuss the Facebook posts that are shared on our Autistic Radio page. And the first post is from Autism Support Community, who's a blogger, late diagnosed autistic, ADHD, 2 sons, writer, blogger, public talks, autism, mental health, bullying. And he shared a quote, and it says, "We don't grow out of autism, but we do grow into it. Through late diagnosis, we can gain greater self-awareness and self-acceptance. Diagnosis can give closure on traumatic lives and empower miraculous transformations." He follows this up by saying, "A few people have contacted me about late diagnosis recently. In one case, it was to thank me for the support I gave them, which helped them to gain their own diagnosis. Another person wanted to know how best they could support their teen after diagnosis. Often I hear from people who cannot get a diagnosis or simply do not want one. The truth is that we're all different. Our lives, experiences, cultures, and age all go to shape our unique journey through autism. That is a great positive and proof of a diverse and inclusive community. From my own perspective, it may resonate or not, there is a process of growing into autism, of growing into our diagnosis and meeting our true selves for the very first time. This growth process can be part of the discovery process, whether diagnosed or self-identifying, both are valid. We do not grow out of autism. It is our neurology, how our brains are wired. I can remember the sense of relief I got after my late diagnosis of autism at 50. Finally, after 3 years of fighting, I felt validated and a sense of meeting my authentic self for the first time. A diagnosis can sit in your top drawer. The content may be harsh and full of medical terminology, but that does not matter. What matters is that after a period of researching, truth-seeking, and finding answers begins. Looking back at our life can be cathartic. I had no idea I was autistic and had suffered prolonged early childhood trauma. It took me 50 years to get to that point. Can you imagine how that felt? At first, I was full of self-doubt, depression, and confusion. Anger crept in. Fear shrouded my thoughts, and I had no support. However, I did transform and began my neurodivergent journey. I researched, talked to others online, joined pages and other groups. Seeking connection with like-minded souls and gaining support has been the turning point. I started to feel a sense of true personal growth. I began to see my traits and the reasons why life had been so unfairly harsh and challenging. Importantly, I stopped being angry with myself. I stopped blaming myself and was finally free to be myself. This growing process was a slow balancing act in my case, and may vary for each of us. I view it as a great positive and constructive way to move forward. If our loved ones get a diagnosis, we can support and listen to them. Most of all, we can grow with them all the way. Diagnosis and discovery can help the whole family and friends in some cases. Then there's also a sense of grief, lost time, lost experiences, lost education, lost quality of life because we were invisible. The lost generation are now finding themselves, and I think society is struggling to embrace those that they often ignored or simply did not see. Diagnosis is a complex subject, and as always, each case to its own. It must be your choice, as it is your life and you deserve the best. Brian. What's people's thoughts?
I relate to most of that because my discovery was similar. I was aware of being autistic after having a discussion about an article read in one of the Sunday newspapers in my 20s. The final diagnosis was more a confirmation of what I already know. It didn't provide any proper support, but after my father's death, I started doing lots of research and joining pages, and I found support via the Facebook pages rather than all the official support.
I I resonated with this too, even though this is the Brian's or individual experience. He seems to be expressing it in such a way that any of us who are late diagnosed could identify with him. And I was even a later diagnosis, and honestly, I did not know, but I had that experience that he describes. It's almost like my life rewound in front of me, although I think I may be slower than him to coming to terms with it, but I admire him and his post.
At 53, and it wasn't really a surprise. But I think although my doctor tried her best and just couldn't get any sort of help for me really, but my friends and relatives, every single one of them, when I told them, they just sort of went, it just wasn't a surprise to them. I did have one person who said something really stupid like, well, you didn't have that 20 years ago, like I caught it like a cold. But other than that, support is important.
Raymond, you trying to speak? Can't hear you, Raymond. I found the post very powerful. And I'm speaking of someone who wasn't late diagnosed, although at the time I thought I was, because I was diagnosed in the late 90s at the age of 17, and it was just before I left high school. And at that time, it felt, oh, this is too late. What would be if I was diagnosed, before school and all that kind of stuff. But as I kind of moved on into adulthood and I went into support groups that were provided and speaking to people, I kind of learned that there was a lot of people that were getting diagnosed far later. Although when I'm saying far later, it was like far later than 17, and it was like late 30s, etc. But as time progressed even further, and as time went on, there was people getting diagnosed at the age of late 60s, 70s even. And it's always interesting to hear different perspectives, because it just shows everybody's life is different, as Brian said in the post. But I felt the post was very powerful in its words, and I can really respond to it. And the powerful thing about it is, it's like, yes, life hasn't, it hasn't been great. There's a lot of regrets, but there's hope, there's positivity. And that's what people need to read. That's what people need to hear. Because a lot of the time you can become stuck. Even if you're diagnosed well before then, it depends how the diagnosis or the identification, the discovery, whatever way it came about, it's like how it comes and how the situation that brings it on and how you feel about it and how it's presented to you, actually. Because if it's presented in a negative way, like, Robbie's saying he was diagnosed, it was Asperger's syndrome. That was the diagnosis I was given. It's a syndrome. It's like there's something wrong with you. You can't socialize. You're obsessed with routine, and you have strange habits, strange hobbies in comparison to everyone else. So you need this sort of kind of post just to, not just to encourage and influence, but also educate others about how everyone who's autistic is different. And being autistic doesn't mean that you're ill, but it depends on who you are and how you feel about your own autism. And it's trying not to say this is what autism is. It's basically a personal perspective on Brian and his own autism.
The way I frame this is about personal freedom and personal realization and personal autonomy. They're the things that I value. And when he points out that diagnosis is not the be-all and end-all, and that self-realization and self-identification are not just adequate, but they are the key part of the process for me. In some ways, the official diagnosis by the medics seems very much less important to me than the self-realization. And as others have said, it's really the community that helps you to reframe yourself, because they are a background of a society that has the correct framework for you if you are neurodivergent. The rest of society is a different framework. So finding your own group and using them to compare yourself and realize for yourself, that really is the key for me in what he's saying.
Yeah, community is important. I mean, you talk about there, Jules, I can recall feeling that being part of a community for the first time, speaking to people about things I've experienced or things I've done, and they were saying, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I've done that as well. And that connection was like, oh, really? Because you're that used to being told, or feeling at least, that what you were doing or how you were feeling was strange. So when someone else says, yeah, I know what you're talking about, and the understanding's there, the connection also comes there. And that's what I remember for the first time being part of an autistic community. It's like people actually understanding what you're talking about. And that is a fantastic thing to have as a memory, because things from then on, despite its ups and downs, was always, better than it was before.
I like what you just said, Harry, better than even the post, maybe.
Robbie comes up with an important comment in the text. The important thing for me is finding people that accept me as I am. Yes, I get that too. Because that's, in fact, what I was talking about just now was the feeling that happened for me. Is someone accepted for who I was and could identify with some of the characteristics or experiences, but being different from them and feeling in a safe space. And Raymond's saying that he's still seeking this community. So sometimes it takes longer for people to actually find what suits. So, but there is out there, it's just finding it. And of course, it's not always easy to find, such as life.
When you say that, do you mean in real life, Harry? Versus on here?
I was talking about a physical community group that I went to, but there's also these online community groups you have now that are safe spaces, which I feel Autistic Radio is, in my own personal opinion. So, both. The comments are continuing, finding people with common interests. The new type of community can be wonderful and supportive as well. And yes, that's the case. I mean, your type of community has been supportive to me in many ways, and it's been great. I mean, my own experiences of neurotypical is like, the mental health support groups and kind of groups where you go for a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, and have a chat. And that's a safe space itself, although it's not autistic based or autistic specific. And that's when the need of feeling you need more. And that's why you go to autistic specific, because there'll be more understanding of who you are. And the mental health thing, as good as it is, it's like an environment where everybody's talking what's wrong with them. And that doesn't always work for people who are autistic. It worked for me for a time, don't get me wrong, because I felt at that time autism or being autistic was something that was wrong. Although my journey now is a lot more different, but at the time, so it did help. It was also good to move on to a certain environment where it was a bit more progressive and not negative and not like, clinically based, in fairness. Talking about common interests, it's already been talked about. Talking about life, just just having friends. And that's a big thing. It's like making friends is a big deal. And it doesn't always have to be close friends. Sometimes it just be someone you could talk to every now and again. It depends what suits. But having that kind of environment is very important for the journey of the diagnosis of the discovery of autism, I feel. But I'm only giving one perspective. The next post is from Rebecca Duffus, specialist teacher and autism advocate, an educational consultant, BSc, PGCE, MA, Autism and Education, experience supporting young people, families in education settings. And what Rebecca shared is a book which is called The Teen's Guide to PDA by Laura Kirby, and the illustrations by Elisa Fricker from Missing the Mark, which is a warm, easy read and beautifully illustrated handbook for anybody navigating life with pathological demand avoidance, PDA, especially teenagers. It has a great mix of clear information and real quotes from teens. It's got practical advice, illustration help with processing, affirming, so many topics covered from school, friendships and family to self-advocacy, understanding anxiety and rejection sensitivity, dysphoria, to name a few. Go and get your copy now. And looking at the picture that was attached to the post, and it's talking about the contents, it's talking about what is PDA anyway, the anxiety, autonomy, rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, friendship and relationships, gender and sexuality, family life, school and education, keeping yourself safe, moving into adulthood, and final thoughts. And it's just going through the pictures, it's kind of showing just different examples of how the book is illustrated as well. What's people's thoughts? Looking at it myself, I'm just wondering how different things would be if I read something like this in my teenage years. That sort of support, sort of kind of information, whether it felt relatable or not. I feel this sort of type of information, type of sharing, type of education, inspiration, support is vital. Although I haven't read it myself, of course I would not have, but it's good to know these things are out there. And when I see these things being demonstrated and being promoted, it's like, I wonder what it would be when it was taught with, stuff like sexuality and relationships and all sorts of stuff that when I was a teenager, I was going through a hard time. And it was like the build up to the diagnosis, like the puberty stage was just like being a child. I was enjoying being a child to an extent. I wanted to be a child forever sort of thing. And it was like getting into secondary school was this sort of sudden sort of, you must think about being an adult. You must start thinking about getting a job. You must think about family. You must think about serious stuff. You had all your wee kind of playtime in primary school. But now this is secondary school, talking about Scottish education. It's meant to be the time where you're supposed to get serious and think about serious future. And just thinking about that right now, even now, in my mid-40s, sounds absolutely terrifying. So this sort of stuff, is vital.
Yeah, changing schools is a terrible. It's quite traumatic. Up until from infants and juniors, I seemed to be in with the same people, and then I remember they put us on a bus and took us to the comprehensive where we were going, and it just looked. Everyone was wearing the same colour outfits. There were bells on the walls. Bells went off to tell you when it was break time or return time. It did seem very intimidating.
I've never heard of this before, but for a moment I thought to myself, can it happen internally? So I just did a little search, and yes, it can. You know, demands you make of yourself, avoiding those. I would need more time to think about it, but I do recall as a child being in the very earliest swimming class where I've said this before, we had to play Ring Around the Rosie on the test and hold hands and go underwater, and I flatly refused. Also, as a child, once our family was on an airplane and I refused, and we all had to get out. I think I really caused a big holdup on that airplane. I have no idea if that's what it means.
We've all got different kind of views and perspectives, Teresa. Just want to add at Robbie's point that there was nothing when he was at school. People like me were just considered naughty children. I know the feeling well, Robbie. Just thinking back of school itself, of secondary school anyway, and how intense it was. Even though there was a bell in my primary school, there wasn't as many, and there wasn't as many classes because everybody was all more together. But you went into secondary school, and because of the way secondary school is, I had to travel further. When I was in primary school, it was walking distance. But in secondary school, I had to get a bus further away. And the class that I was used to was all split up because all the primary schools were all merged into this particular school, as I'd imagine in any school. And because this was a Roman Catholic school as well, it was the only one within so many miles. So there were so many different schools in the one, so many primary schools being integrated into the school itself. So the people you were familiar with, you no longer shared a class. So there was all these new people you had to get used to. There was more bells because the classes were segregated, and it was like every 53 minutes or something. It was like a ridiculous timetable. What can you do in 53 minutes? But that's how they did it. And it was constant stress, constant thinking about the next class. You'll be doing maths, and then you'll be doing geography, and then you'll be doing physical education. It was all these different things to try and get used to. And if you look just a wee bit different, if you acted just a little bit different, you get picked on. And I think I never had a chance anyway because I had red hair and freckles. Which was I'd be ridiculed for that anyway. But even that, it's amazing how memories pop up when you're talking and thinking. Yeah, a few comments made. Raymond saying that getting a bus is part of the education. Yeah, I would agree with that. Robbie saying I went from a 2-classroom school taught by nuns to a large comprehensive. And Raymond says I like the variation in groups and got away from real cycles. All these different experiences.
As I said before, I just didn't speak in high school. I guess that's avoidance.
Selective mutism. I think that's what they call it.
Yeah, I spoke everywhere else. I mean, not a lot. I was very introverted, but not like I did there. I think it was the only way to deal with it.
Yeah, we all got different ways of coping with things. The way I dealt with it was, don't want to say the wrong way. I mean, there's no wrong way, but the way that I did it is I just acted silly. And then when you act silly, it gets you picked on. And not just that, you get into trouble with teachers and, a lot. It's just weird thinking back. It's like I was fighting against authority, even though I wasn't really. I was kind of lashing out because I wasn't sure what was going on. But there's other times where people just don't speak at all. There's other times where people lash out in different ways. And thinking back on, I mean, I'm only going on my own experience of school. From, let's say, it's basically mid to late 90s. And I can understand the way that many people may have acted the way they've acted, autistic or not, because of the way the environment was. It was very stressful, very, you must do. Firstly, even though it suited me, in fairness, was a uniform. That suited me, but didn't suit others. The routine, sometimes the teachers were quite, not physically brutal, but they could be mentally brutal. They could ridicule you if you didn't do something in so-called the right way. Like if you were so-called not great at PE, or even if you couldn't answer a question right away. I mean, there are many reasons why actually many autistic people avoid school altogether. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing about these things at the moment. Yeah, just looking at Robbie's comment. School finally broke me in final year. At end of break, I just sat in a corner and cried. I did not return. I've got to say that happened to me as well, Robbie. it did break me in a certain, in a certain way. And that's how that crisis got my diagnosis in the first place, because I actually sort of forced it. Because at the time, it's kind of weird thinking back on it, I was going through such a tough time that I was depressed. So I was seeing a psychiatrist at the time anyway, locally. And I was even on, was it Prozac? And I can remember my dad saying, "Now don't tell anybody in school that you're on Prozac." Not because it's an embarrassment, it was because it's like known as the happy pill or something, and it was like people may take advantage of me and take some off you. Although it's quite weird that saying that, because I didn't take them with me. I took them in the house, but there was that kind of prejudice against take medication. But my point is the diagnosis came from the breakdown I had in school because of the way school was, and I kind of forced myself to go into the local kind of mental health unit because I was 16. It was an adult one, and I was recommended it if I needed it. Although mum and dad wouldn't want me to go into it, and understood that, but it was that sort of journey that got into my diagnosis. Within 6 months. The next post is from Pete Warnby, autistic author. He's a writer, autistic and ADHD award-winning writer and speaker on autism and autistic lived experience. And he shared the following. Always interesting to read the comments on my posts that get popular and escape my immediate bubble of neuro-affirming people. That's when you really see how far we have to go. People arguing that eye contact is absolutely necessary and must be forced. Well, why is it not important in some other cultures then? That autistic people must learn to live in the real world. Let's see how you like it when the air con breaks at work and now you're too hot. That people shouldn't demand that everyone else changes for them when we've been changing for everyone else for our whole lives. Attitudes are still terrible out there. The fact autistic people are anxious, depressed, and worse doesn't seem to interest a lot of people at all. I'm so tired. What's people's thoughts?
Eye contact's a horrific thing. I remember going to job interviews and I was literally staring as hard as I could at the bridge of people's noses just to make it look like I was actually looking at them. But I just really wanted to be looking around and getting the feel for the space of where I was.
I still avoid eye contact by taking notes in almost every circumstance. I think even when I go to the doctor's office, I have a notepad.
I don't think it's understood that forced eye contact is actually quite painful, mentally painful. If you relax, well, if I'm relaxed and relaxed company, the eye contact will eventually happen, and just, naturally, slowly but naturally, it will happen. As long as I know or feel that I have the choice to look away, and still, the comfort of the person knowing that I'm still listening, and I'm not, out of focus. I'm still listening to what they're saying, like in comfortable conversation, with friends, family. But in more official settings, it's like you have to look at someone in the eyes for them to be convinced that you're actually listening to them. And as I've said already, it's actually quite mentally painful to do that. And then doing that, you're concentrating too much in doing that you can't listen, because you feel that you're kind of strained by trying to do that eye contact thing, but not taking the information in while doing that at the same time. It's a strange one why eye contact is so important in so-called neurotypical or normal circumstances in certain cultures. Well, like my culture is like you have to look at somebody. I don't understand that at all. And this sort of attitude where stop asking us to adjust things to suit you, to make you feel bad, to make you feel selfish, for having the audacity to wanting comfort so that you can be part of the community. I mean, it goes on, and I totally understand what Pete's saying. Robbie comes up with a good point. People don't have eye contact when they speak on the phone. And Raymond also says, if you do too much eye contact, then what are you looking at? And someone might say, what are you looking at? Why are you looking at me so deeply, or why are you looking through me? I can actually remember someone saying that to me. It was like a teacher giving me a round, and a friend of mine says, it looks like you're looking straight through her. And I'm going, and I thought, what are you talking about? Then I realised, it was kind of forced sort of kind of eye contact, just so that because if you looked away, that looked at as bad manners. Yeah, I agree with Robbie. Most of it is being compliant. That's a word that comes up quite a lot in our conversations. And it's very true. It's like doing as you're told, doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that is very frustrating. It's like you want to say, who the hell are you talking to? But yeah, that's what it is. These rules that someone's made up that everybody's meant to comply to. The next post is from Mind. which was originally shared by an autistic page. But Mind themselves is a charity organisation. We are Mind, the mental health charity. We're fighting for mental health, for support, for respect. And what is shared is the following. Remember this. Asking someone directly about suicidal thoughts does not increase their risk and can actually help them. Direct conversation about suicidal thoughts can reduce stress, make people feel less alone, and encourage them to seek help. It's important to remember that talking openly about suicidal thoughts doesn't put the idea in someone's head. It can be helpful. Honest conversations can make people feel less distressed and remind them that they are not alone. What's people's thoughts? I know it's a bit heavy, but I'm aware that it's been Suicide Prevention Week and etc. So it's worthwhile discussing.
I think it all depends, because I was in a similar situation, and the person who was talking with me fancied themselves as a sort of amateur psychologist, and they had no idea. And I think, yeah, it's good to talk about these things, but you have to be very, very careful about it.
I think it helps when society is talking about it more. So, for example, it's clearer now in some obituaries, and just having a suicide awareness week. I think when I was young, people didn't talk about it, and I had a very, my first attempt, I was 8 years old, and I was encouraged to not speak about it, that a story was made that I had to tell.
That's a really unfortunate part of a lot of people's history. Shame being attached to decisions that people make when they are in extreme circumstances. So the more we can move ourselves as a society, or even just as a small group amongst ourselves, to say that issues around ending one's life and issues around difficulties with our isolation and issues around depression, they're all things that we need to be really practiced in to express things openly. And when we find that we start to practice expressing openly, other people come forward and speak about their experience, and everything becomes much more normalised, comfortable, less shameful, less of this don't speak. So we will continue on Autistic Radio, not just during Suicide Prevention Week, but we will continue amongst ourselves to always open a an ear to somebody.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jules. Yes, it's a very sensitive topic, but a very important one. But it has to be done in the right way, the right supportive way. The way that it's not forced upon, but is a safe space to do so. And people talking, in the text about things being evicted from home and not having money to support self is sometimes treated as something nothing more than faulty thinking. Things are played down. Things are maybe not done in the right way. It's, saying that seems kind of hypercritical, but it's very true. I mean, I know what it's like to feel suicidal. And it's, whether it was suicidal or just seeking or crying for help, I'm not sure. But there was a time before my diagnosis that I thought I was going mad. And it was all in my head. So it was basically feeling like the life that I was going to lead, or my life at that moment, was just misery. And it's, that happens to so many people. And so many people take their own lives through that. So many people suffer through that, and there's attempts at doing that. And the prejudice that's actually around that is very, it really baffles me as I get older. It's like people say if someone does that, it impacts people around them, like family, friends, any death does. But sometimes people are very prejudiced in how they portray it. Like the person that's took their own life is a coward. They took the easy way out, which sounds very strange to me because I do not think that doing that is easy. It's not easy. Someone taking their own life, that's not easy. So it's, the understanding has to be out there. A safe space needs to be out there. And Autistic Radio is certainly a place that is. But no one is forced to speak about such things. But in fact, it's so comfortable for myself that I just actually talk about my own experience of feeling that way at one point in my life and actually doing it, saying it out loud now. But yes, it's intense, it's hard to talk about, but it's very important.
I think that it really depends on our entire society being able to know about it and talk about it. Because one of the unsafe places is actually in the mental health world. My mother was a psychiatric nurse when this happened, and then it happened again. And in the hospital when I was 21, she was still a psychiatric nurse at that time. And she said that I was embarrassing her in front of other professionals. Now, times have changed, and sorry, my dog is talking to me, but I think it depends on a society-wide reframing of what this means.
Robbie brings up a good point. The important thing is being listened to. Because for many people, there's this sort of feel, or even sort of actually happening, of people feeling or being treated as like you've been over dramatic. You're over the top. Stop being over the top about something so trivial. So it doesn't matter. Why is that bothering you so much? I think people's feelings, particularly people who are autistic, it's not taken seriously enough. You know, the slightest mistake, the slightest regret about something, or, you know, it can be really draining, it can be really hurtful. And that can be enough to drive you over the edge. And it's not just autism, it's a lot more than that. But what we're talking about is autism. So in that respect, it's like autistic people feeling they're not being taken seriously enough. And that sort of prejudice against the word suicide and taking one's life, or whatever. It's like if I think I said it before. It's just that environment that you're in is so difficult, and environment's so difficult that you're not being understood about when you're crying for help or just wanting a bit of advice. Sometimes you're kind of shielding and protecting yourself by not saying too much, because you never know. The criticism of your behaviour can sometimes be quite severe. It's really a sensitive subject, and I feel even though things have improved, it is not understood enough. The next post is from Autistic in Living the Dream, a personal blog, PhD student, researcher, speaker and trainer, queer, disabled and very tired. And what they've shared is the following. Becoming me. A queer autistic role model my son can be proud of. I have always felt misplaced, misunderstood and confused. When I realised in my mid-20s that I was autistic, things started to make more sense to me. But it wasn't the whole story. After my diagnosis and all the haha moments which came with it, I could finally get down to the business of sorting my gender and sexuality. There has always been a butch quality to me, even from a young age. New people often mistook me for male, especially with my short hair, baggy shirts and skater jeans. The activities I enjoyed the most were considered boys' activities: wrestling, horror films, scouts, den building and skating. I always hung around with boys. We spoke the same language and we liked the same things. When we became older teenagers, everything got more complicated. Most of the boys began fancying girls, and I did too. I didn't feel the same way about girls as I did boys. I liked them, I fancied them, but they also confused and horrified me. We had the same bodies, but none of the same mannerisms. We very rarely liked the same thing. I didn't want to talk about makeup and boys, and they didn't want to skate or go to heavy metal gigs. Everyone kept telling me I was a girl. I also liked girls. So was I gay. I liked boys too, but they were mostly my friends. Everyone seemed to be unavailable to me romantically. They were just too confusing and contradictory, and I couldn't keep up with their inconsistencies. I spent so many years trying to untangle my sexuality without realizing that my gender needed more exploring too. I was seen as a girl, but it wasn't how I felt. When I started my undergraduate degree in my late 20s, I never knew that it was going to help with my queer awakening. My dissertation focused on how to support gender non-conforming autistic children in schools and youth work, as many of the children I support at work are trans and or non-binary and autistic. This sparked an interest in my current MRES studies, collecting trans and or non-binary autistic narratives. I have spoken to some amazing people, pored over so many books, articles and online pieces, and they have all resonated with me. My research has helped me understand my gender and unpack a lot of internalized biphobia, which I didn't realize I had been carrying all these years. My continued self-understanding can only benefit from me coming out, fully, loudly, proudly, unapologetically. I need to come out so I can understand and appreciate myself more, and so I become a better role model for my child and the children I work with, many of whom wave their queer flags proudly. So, now I am out. I suppose it boils down to how I want to socially transition. As I write this, I have maybe a foot out of the closet, but I want to be fully outside of it. I know this is a lifelong journey, which starts with the first step, but what am I expecting to change for me? What do I want and need? I want to go by they, them pronouns. Most people I interact with online refer to me with these pronouns and they just feel nice and warm, like they finally come home. Changing to someone's new pronouns. Changing to someone's new pronouns is easy once you get to the swing of it. Example, I like Katie and they are fun to be around. Their laugh is infectious. I know it'll take time, as I've been known by different pronouns for 31 years now. Even when I talk about myself in the third person, I sometimes get it wrong. I don't want to refer to as a woman, lady, girl. These words don't describe me. They never have, and they likely never will. These words have been like the itchiest and most uncomfortable jumper being forced onto me, especially in the last few years. It's no individual person's fault. It's just the way our society has been built. Apart from that, everything stays the same. I am still a mum, auntie, sister, Mrs., daughter. I am non-binary, bisexual, and bloody exhausted. But I am still Katie. Bisexually Pride, Bisexually Awareness Week. What's your thoughts?
My first thought was, what an excellent degree. I don't think very many people in Canada get a master's in research. And then, honestly, my second thought was, I'm proud of them.
I'm proud of them too. Reading through that, it couldn't have been easy to do that. But it sounds like such a relief to put that in words. Although it'd been a massive journey to do so. The thing that I'm realising as I get older is individualism that's out there. The way that society is trying to pinhole into like two genders, to this, to that, and people getting offended when things are a bit different. I find it so inspiring reading things like Katie's post. It's like every individual is different. The thing that frustrates people is because it makes life in their eyes more complicated. But then again, life is more complicated anyway. Even when they try to keep things in so-called boxes. Like they do that with autism. They do that, with anything. So, I like reading that out and very inspired by it.
There are at least 5 places in the world where they have more than 2 genders, and at least 1 place in the world where you always have been able to and still are able to get any one of the 3 on your passport.
I'm reading what Raymond wrote. Sometimes I feel sex has nothing to do with gender, it's something else. And I think a lot of people feel exactly that same thing. So I tried to answer it from my middle-aged idea of how things have changed during my lifetime. And I said, isn't that the new normal, Ray? Sex being more biological as a term, and gender a range of personal expression, how you express yourself as a gender is a chosen thing that often people reject. I come in from a different situation because I would talk about my non-normative state as more to do with sexual attraction and the act of sex, because I'm bisexual. I don't see myself as an alternative gender. I see myself as very male. But then when I come across the third gender in India, I'm attracted to that person in their third gender. So there's a lot for people to try and get their heads round, where we've got more than 3 concepts: the sexual act, the biological sex as it looks as though a child is, even chromosomes, or the gender that they express themselves as, and then other versions as well. And people are using these terms so loosely to try to take their own prejudice and their own feeling about where they are and force it forward. So the more the person who is in the post here gets the opportunity to express themselves, the better, I think. But it's a dangerous world we live out there.
That's true. That is true. I think some gender identities are chosen and some are biological. ambiguous gender children have been, as infants, doctors have decided which gender they will end up living as for quite some time. I wonder what would have happened to them in the past before the medical system was the way it is, where midwives and communities made that decision.
Well, unfortunately, there's plenty of evidence to say that societies have rejected children that look different from their versions of the norm. So an awful lot of disabled children in various ways were put out into the forest to die, and that would include people who are ambiguous in their formation often. So I don't know. I don't think we can guess that the human being has always been that compassionate.
Except perhaps in these 5 or 6 societies, maybe.
That's a nice thought. There's a texter saying about touch. Autistic people apparently have issues with touch and being held. How does this influence sexual experience? I hated being touched by somebody who wasn't going to, who was not invited, and I think hugging was something that wasn't a big part of my upbringing. But all of those things during adolescence, when you're experimenting sexually, are things like all other boys and girls can be worked through depending on your own experience. So there's an awful lot of autistic people out there who have very fulfilling sensual experiences through touch that in normal circumstances, like today when I was touched by a stranger, would be a reaction towards extreme emotion. It's all about context, isn't it?
Raymond says, so this invitation is the thing? Potentially. The next post is from Robbie Prosser. It's about masking and unmasking. I masked most of my life, but it did not make my life easier. While I tried to mask, I could not hide many of my emotions to comply with neurotypical expectations. I could not hide when I was unhappy or bored, and I could not hide when I was not interested. When I'm anxious, it's often misinterpreted as being angry and seen as threatening. As far as I remember, deliberate masking started when I was not to change what I wrote about in my writing was being seen as too childish. It was only in mid to late 40s I realised that my attempts at masking were not helpful to me. While some people may find masking a benefit, I did not. It was very exhausting with absolutely no benefits. I, for example, did not know if people liked me or the person I was trying to be. I came to a decision not to mask anymore than I knew a typical person would. I started what would become a lifelong journey, unmasking and becoming me. It is difficult and sometimes painful because the risk of rejection when masking stops. But the benefits are knowing the truth about who does and who does not like me. Much of the masking was and still is automatic, but I am working toward being the real me. I have less friendship as I try not to please people. I have less friendships as I try not to people please. I, however, look at it as if they can accept the real me, then it was not a genuine friendship. It is their problem, not mine. Masking has been extremely exhausting. For me, it did not stop any of my interests. I just hid any of that people might not approve of. I was happier after I started to unmask because I was able to be myself. I know who liked me and who did not, and I was able to make informed decisions about where I wanted to be and what I did. If I'm not valued somewhere, I am not meant to be there, and they are not my people. What's your thoughts?
I used to mask all the time, and so I was very outgoing, extrovert, witty, and it did get to a point where I basically burned out. I always think of it's like a wheel that's going round and round, and then there's something that makes it wobble, and then once it starts wobbling, you're trying to stop it wobbling, and in the end you just burn out.
Robbie does come up with a good point. Pleasing people is exhausting. Masking is exhausting. And I think, while reading that, I think that my own experience is I don't mask as much as I used to. And the attitude is now is you either like me or you don't. Because sometimes masking make people not like you anyway. People are unpredictable. You can't predict people and how they react to how you are and how you mask or how you unmask or what you do and what you don't do. No matter how, positive your actions may be, there'll always be a negative reaction from someone. So I get it. And sometimes feeling if you're denying your identity, your who you are just to please people, it can be, overwhelming and, a negative impact.
I've been experiencing Robbie live, dropping in at the 444 on a Sunday, speaking here on the 555 in the live. And the unmasked Robbie is a delightful person to be around. Interesting thoughts, interesting experiences of life. So maybe that's the other thing here as well, isn't it? That when you are unmasked and you do find people that accept you, and it's a freeing experience.
Yeah, I can't think of a place where I could unmask. Perhaps here, but I don't even know if I'm doing it, as I said last week. Only recently have I been noticing that when I'm alone, by myself, I can unmask. Now, that might not make any kind of sense. Maybe it just means I can stim or something like that. But this mask has been on for so long. I don't know. It is exhausting. I think COVID really helped it come off, and then somebody noticed, and not a good way. And then I went for my diagnosis, but it felt really unsafe to have that happen. And so I don't know when I'll stop masking, but I can't wait. It sounds good.
Personally, I find that generally throughout my life I've had to do less forced masking to fit in with situations than other people. I've either been completely outside society, or when I've been in society, I've been able to shape it to my own purposes. Being the boss in my business and not having to deal with anybody except the person who matters most to me, the love of my life. So masking isn't something that's been so rigidly forced on me. It can be playful for me. We can say to each other, we're going out to this event and we are going to play these people. And our daughter would say that there has never been an event that she's been at that we've ever looked normal or acted normal or in any way fitted in. And that was us playfully masking along. So it really does depend, this word masking, on people's experience and how fortunate they've been during their lives. Because losing yourself in a creation that has been imposed on you from the outside is the masking that people often talk about and uncovering.
Oh, I think that you've said something very important to me there. Thank you. I think that with the rare person who I might meet somewhere, the mask could slip off. And I believe with my children and grandchildren and animals and my sister, it may come off a bit, depending on which one they are.
I think it's really interesting what you bring up and what you recognise, though, is that the ingrained masking that you're now looking back on of all of those years of following that, creating that and enforcing that and living within that is something that you peel back and gradually uncover. But perhaps just the knowledge of it at the beginning is the biggest step, and the rest of it is maybe not so traumatic. Maybe it's a tipping point, just realising about the masking in the first few months and year or so of realisation that matters.
Maybe. And I think I need maybe to speak to somebody about this, who knows who. But because my mother was a psychiatric nurse and started to really enforce the masking when I was 7 years old and died a year before I was diagnosed, there is something. I had thought I would feel a great sense of relief when she died. I know that doesn't sound very kind, but it can be a fact. And as I say, because she was a psychiatric nurse and did a lot of behavior modification on me, I don't know where it begins or ends sometimes.
Yeah, and that takes us into the world of ABA, which is still a behaviour modification program that is recommended throughout the world. About time now, Harry.
Thanks, everyone. It was a great conversation tonight, as always. Quite intense topics, as sometimes our broadcasts can be. But thanks, everybody, for being involved. And thanks for the people that that shared those posts, that give us the topics to talk about. That's much appreciated. So this is Harry's Facebook for Sunday the 21st of September 2025, which is part of the Spectrum Voices conversation, which is broadcast live every Sunday, 5:55 to 7:30 PM UK time on Facebook and other platforms. I look forward to doing this again. I've enjoyed tonight very much. And now I hand over to Jules.
Wow. Harry, you've excelled yourself in not only in the things that you've shared, but the things that you have put from your own personal perspective. And everyone, that was the type of show that people need to be aware of out there in autism land. We'll move, as we always do, to our own charity that supports Autistic Radio, the Open Meeting.